You're listening to The Alex Jones Show.
Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show on this Tuesday, December 16th, 2014. I'm David Knight, your host today. I'm going to be joined in the next segment by Marin Katusa, who wrote The Colder War. This is a very fascinating book because for me, a lot of these events, I was aware of them, I remembered them, I didn't have them in a timeline, in a context. And I want to read to you because I found this to be absolutely amazing. The false flag techniques that Vladimir Putin used to hoist himself to the top. This is something that parallels exactly what has happened with our government so many times in the last decade. Now, there were they had a previous war with Chechnya that basically left the Soviet Union embarrassed and looking ineffective. He used a second Chechen war to make himself look very strong and powerful as a leader. It was a short war, even though the conflict stretched on for a long time. They declared victory very early, kind of like Bush with his mission accomplished. But I want to read to you what led up to this. Now, this is from the book, The Colder War. They said the first of 4 closely spaced terrorist attacks came September 4th, 1999 in Dagestan. Now, that would be in Chechnya. There was a bomb that leveled a barracks that was housing Russian soldiers and their families. 64 Russian men, women, and children were killed. 5 days later, there was a bombing in Moscow, this time an apartment building. The working-class neighborhood in the city's southeast had a device that had been stashed on the building's ground floor, brought down all 8 floors, and killed 94 residents as they slept. Now, here's the key. Within hours, the Russian government officials all but certified that Chechen terrorists were responsible, and calls for retaliation came from all political quarters. Instead of treating the site as an active crime scene, however, and sifting through the ruins, what did the Russian authorities do? They razed the building just days after the blast and hauled the rubble away to a municipal dump. Where have you seen that happen before? To an FSB storehouse. Not the FBI's storehouse like we do here, but this is the FSB. Nothing was left for examination by third parties. Then 4 days later, authorities were called early in the morning to check on suspicious activity outside another apartment building on Moscow's outskirts. They left about 2 a.m., not finding anything. They didn't notice a massive bomb in the building, which exploded 3 hours later at 5 a.m. in the morning. A 9-story building collapsed, 121 died. Then came something very odd. A speaker of the Duma, Russia's lower parliamentary house, relayed to the parliament a report that he just received that an apartment building 700 miles south of Moscow had been blown up the previous night. Not in Moscow, but in a different location. Okay, so what happens is that didn't happen yet. That happened later. Shades of the BBC announcing that Building 7 had collapsed. Now, it said that it seemed no more than an inconsequential blunder until 3 days later, an apartment building in the city that he had named was indeed blown up. And so a Duma member asked, how did it happen that you told us on Monday about a blast that didn't occur until Thursday? In lieu of an answer, the questioner had his microphone cut off. Then it gets even more interesting. Then something very strange happened in Ryazan, 120 miles southeast of Moscow. They say everybody was on hyper alert, looking for something to happen to an apartment building. So some residents noted that a white car pulled up and 2 guys get out, go into the basement, and leave large sacks. They call the police, who then discovered 3 110-pound sacks wired to a detonator and a timer in the basement. They quickly evacuated the building. A local explosive expert was called in to disarm the device. He determined that they contained an explosive, RDX, powerful enough to bring down the entire building, as we've seen before. In the meantime, they blocked all the roads leading out of this town. Acting Prime Minister Putin flexed his rhetorical muscles, he says, and congratulated the residents for their vigilance. The Russian Interior Minister chimed in, lauded recent improvements, and then they found out they actually arrested the guys, and they were with the FSB. They were their CIA. Then they changed the story. They said, we were just testing your vigilance. Do you see how this happens? It's called a false flag. It's used over and over again by every government. We're going to talk to the author of that, Marin Katusa, right after the break. Stay with us.
The average person's life is filled with unexpected challenges. Unlock the energy it takes to defeat these daily beasts with super male or super female vitality, specifically designed to assist the body in regulating proper hormone balance to create superior vitality in males and females. Supercharge and conquer your world at InfoWarsLife.com or call 1-888-253-3139.
The government's Department of Homeland Security is buying up loads of ammo. At the same time, they're restricting civilians' rights to own and purchase firearms. Can you put two and two together? Infidel Body Armor can stop every round, including hollow points and .308 sniper rounds, is reasonably priced and fully legal. But for how long? Go to InfidelBodyArmor.com, spelled INFIDEL bodyarmor.com. Infidel Body Armor. Just won't quit.
InfoWarsLife.com. Check it out today. I have set out to bring you the most hardcore, cutting-edge supplements and nutraceuticals, bar none. And that's what you'll find at InfoWarsLife.com. We have rejected literally hundreds of products from the InfoWars Life line because they are not of the very highest quality, or because they're not 100% organic, or because they don't pass all of the strictest toxicology tests there are that we have listed at InfoWarsLife.com. Whether it's Survival Shield Nascent Iodine or DNA Force, Super Male Vitality, Super Female Vitality, Lung Cleanse, Fluoride Shield, Oxy Powder. I believe that all of these products will blow you away like they've done the thousands of other customers that have visited InfoWarsLife.com and believed in us and tried the products. Folks, check out InfoWarsLife.com today and the entire line of groundbreaking, cutting-edge, hardcore products. 2015 is almost here, and with it comes those New Year's resolutions to finally transform your body the way you want it. There's a reason over 88% of New Year's resolutions fail. Make this year different by equipping yourself with Oxy Powder, the next level in cleansing the body naturally. Using super oxygenation, Oxy Powder, available through InfoWarsLife.com, gently cleanses the body while you sleep with easy capsules. InfoWars Nightly News Director Rob Dew has been using Oxy Powder with incredible success.
Took it that first day, then I took it for 6 more days after that. 12 pounds melted off in about a week. I'd say a week, 7 days. And I've been able to keep it off, too. My wife was like, wow, you look really good. And I'm like, I know. I guess it's this Oxy Powder.
2015 can be different. Diet and exercise are important, but a lot of us have already tried that. Oxy Powder flushes it out. Secure your Oxy Powder at InfoWarsLife.com. That's InfoWarsLife.com or 888-253-3139.
From his Central Texas Command Center, deep behind enemy lines, the information war continues. It's Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, your host today. And we're going to be talking to Marin Katusa, the author of The Colder War. If you don't hear the previous segment based on your radio station, if they're carrying the news in the previous segment, I would suggest that you look at the online version of what I covered. It was a very interesting chronology of the way that Putin used false flags to essentially ascend to power. A lot of parallels to what goes on in this country, or maybe even better yet, buy the book. This book is a page-turner. I really enjoyed it. It puts a lot of events that I remember vaguely. It brings them back, freshens them up, puts them in a timeline, and more importantly, puts them in a much larger context. Let's go to, is Marin on the line now? Okay, let's go to Marin Katusa, the author of The Colder War. He works for Casey Research. He is a economics advisor. He has a newsletter there, as well as you manage a hedge fund, don't you, as well?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, it's one of the largest in Western Canada.
Yes, and I tell you what, you certainly know the context, and we've seen massive moves In the last couple of weeks, we've seen the U.S. Congress move to cover derivatives for the banks, something that has massive implications for U.S. taxpayers. But we also see these this massive move by Saudi Arabia to not cut production in the face of falling energy prices, essentially creating a lot of problems for Russia already. We see that the ruble has fallen 20%. They have raised their interest rates to 17%. Talk about that a little bit.
But you're nailing all these right on the head. And congratulations to you, because your viewers are getting information that they're not getting in the the mainstream media. What a lot of people, if you want a breaking story, what my sources in Russia are now telling me that actually Lavrov, who's the equivalent of the Secretary of Foreign Affairs for the Russians, has basically stated and warned that the Russians, because now they view Crimea as part of Russia, they're going to be moving nuclear weapons there. And according to the Russian strategy, if you want to talk about false flags, here's the ultimate false flag, where now the Russians are going to be moving nuclear weapons into Crimea, which is a huge risk for the Western authorities. Now, in the last 24 hours, Germany has now also done a 180 on the U.S. sanctions and saying, wait, let's time out here. Germany does not want Russia and Turkey to solidify a long-term contract deal, because the last thing Germany wants is to be vulnerable, and for the European Union to be vulnerable on Turkey's holding the tap. So now Turkey is holding off on advancing the sanctions. So we're in real time. Things are changing, and the Russians have many more false flags to keep the turmoil going. Yes, the oil price has gone down for Russia, but what's important to understand is the ruble price has decreased much more than the price of the oil. So if you're a Russian oil producer, that's the best of both, the best that you can possibly be in the situation, because you're still in a bull market or an uptrend in your oil. So these are very important facts to understand that our Western media is not talking about.
One of the things that I'm concerned about is putting the American taxpayer on the hook for ensuring through the FDIC program the derivatives market, because there's already been reports that a lot of oil futures are going to be essentially worthless. Already that's happening. As the future market starts to tumble, that's going to spread out, as we've seen in the past, to other commodities, as well as we're already seeing to the currency in Russia. And of course, that's going to continue to spread to the larger stock market. Looks very unstable.
It is the biggest risk right now to the North American markets that nobody's talking about. In our at the end of the chapter in our book, The Colder War, we get into exactly that, why to understand that derivatives is so important. And this really is nuclear economic weapons of mass destruction. That who's regulating this? Which banks are going to be vulnerable? And Americans need to understand, is your personal savings at risk here? And I'm telling you, the implosion of the debt and the derivatives markets on the U.S. shale, everyone's thinking that it's the Russians that are suffering. The U.S. shale sector is significantly suffering at $55 oil. So there's a lot of risks out there.
Oh, absolutely. And to me, it looks like a massive economic war, of course, has already broken out with what's going on with the oil. That's Putin's base. He's built his country, as you pointed out. His master plan is to base the country on natural resources. So when they attack that, meanwhile, Putin is attacking the petrodollar, which has essentially been the big leverage that America has had in terms of being the world's economy. Let's go back and talk. Let's kind of run this out. Talk about how this is not something that started with the Cold War. This is what you point out is called the Great Game, going back to Rudyard Kipling. This is something that's been going on with Russia and the West for a long time. Talk about that a little bit.
Definitely. So let's bring it back to when, it was the Western world that discovered oil in the Middle East. And if you go to Iran and understand the history, we go through all that in the Colder War. But essentially, the British, that's where they secured all their oil for World War II, was through Iran. And then the Americans came in the 50s and they overthrew the existing regime, and then it backfired on them. So then they moved over to Saudi Arabia. Now, when the oil crisis in the early 70s happened, America was faced with a double attack. First of all, oil prices quadrupled essentially in a few months. And the second one was when the French basically called the US dollar and wanted their gold back. Nixon had no choice but to close the gold window. So now Kissinger had to come up with a plan, and what he devised was he went to Saudi Arabia and said, look, this is what we need to do. We can guarantee your family, the House Assad, a long-lasting regime, but this is what you need to do. You can only sell your oil in terms of U.S. dollars, and then you have to reinvest those currency, those reserves back into the U.S. dollar. And with Saudi Arabia as the most powerful producer of the OPEC nations, then you had Kuwait follow, Qatar, UAE, and other OPEC nations. So that's the beginning of the petrodollar